So, is the karate that you learned good for self-defense, or more importantly, is the karate that you might be teaching good for self-defense? Now, there's a common misconception amongst both laymen and martial arts, and actually, sadly, a lot of martial arts instructors, that all self-defense situations will be a stand-up street fight. And that simply isn't true. Self-defense situations vary wildly. And even if they were all street fights, the chances are they won't start by your opponent stepping back with their jukes up at a convenient kicking range for you. The chances are they're going to start at an arm's length, or possibly even closer if you don't know how to put up a fence. And they're going to start with a sucker punch, or at very, very best, if you're lucky, a pushing or shoving match, which will very, very quickly escalate into punches. So, the point I'm trying to make is that karate students and, as I said before, sadly their instructors often fall into the trap of thinking, well, I've got a really strong reverse punch, I've got a great reliable front kick, surely those things are going to protect me in a self-defense situation. Well, the answer is yes, they will protect you in some self-defense situations, but in a bunch of others and a massive amount of other self-defense situations, those skills just won't be the first thing. Well, you won't be able to pull those off as the first course of action you take, and maybe you might not be able to do them at all. So here's what I mean. Maybe the first thing you know about being in a self-defense situation is you've been grabbed from behind, maybe in a bear hug, maybe with your hand over your mouth, and you're being dragged backwards. Maybe the first thing you know about being in a self-defense situation is that you've been sucker punched from behind, or maybe you just fail to put up your fence and in a confrontation, and they start swinging punches from closer than an arm's length away. Maybe the first thing you know about being in a situation is you've been tackled to the ground from here, or maybe they've just straight away grabbed and started to wrestle with you. Maybe the self-defense situation and you've started on the ground. Maybe you get pushed over or tripped over, and your starting position is they're standing and you're on your hands and knees. So, what the point is you don't get to choose how a self-defense situation starts. To think that you will prevent people from getting in close to you always is an absolute myth. Rory Miller talks about this in his book, Meditations on Violence. Great book, by the way. Anyway, let me crack on. So the point I'm trying to make is your experiences in dojo sparring, especially if it's point sparring or even in tournament, is going to be wildly different from self-defense. I want you to even think about the psychology of someone who attacks another human being. What frame of mind do you need to be in to think, oh, it's a good idea to try and hit another human being and try and beat them into the ground, or worse? So everything about it is, well, just about everything about it is going to be different to what you experience in points fighting. Even the most common techniques are going to be different to straight punches and front kicks and round kicks like you're used to. So, the moral of the story is, if you want to be prepared for self-defense, you need to be familiar with what self-defense is and what it looks like, and all of the wide range of situations that you might find yourself in. You need to be prepared for real violence and how jarring and how shocking and how stressful that situation is. So bearing all of that in mind, we need to assess your karate training against the habitual acts of violence and what real violence is actually like. So when we're assessing your karate training, we're going to look at two areas. We're going to assess from here, first of all, your training methodology, and secondly, the actual solutions that you are familiar with and whether you've got conditioned responses for those solutions, which is kind of intrinsic to the first part as well. I'm going to explain. So firstly, you've got to look at your training methodology. What happens often in teaching self-defense is that you're taught in a choreographed drill with a very, very compliant opponent. Someone goes, look, I'm throwing a spinning punch at you, get ready to defend it. And you're completely aware, you see them coming from here, it's all very, very easy. And as a result, from here, there are two things that happen. Firstly, some solutions that martial artists teach are born of that bubble, and as a result they come up with stuff like, oh, you're going to block this thing, and then you're going to from here wrap their arm around their back and from here walk them off to the police station and everything will be rosy. But in reality, this is what's going to happen is as they're throwing their right, you block, and then from there immediately they're throwing a left punch straight afterwards. That left punch catches you because you're over-focused on the right, because you want to try and grab that arm, twist it around their back, etc. And when you're over-focused on the right, that left clips you from here and knocks you off balance. Then you've lost the right arm, they hit you with the right arm again. That completely disorientates you, and now they rain a bunch of blows on you. And the point is self-defense techniques learnt in that bubble. The worst ones are, of course, the stepping through lunge punches, which never actually happens in self-defense. But I would go on about that for some other time. But the point is from here, if you learn it in the bubble of compliant partners, or if the solutions, more importantly, are developed in the bubble of compliant partners and choreographed drills, then guess what? They are debatable. If you know what I mean, they may work, but they've never been tested, and the chances are they may well fail you. And aside from actually having the solutions developed, you've got to make sure you train at that non-compliant, highly realistic level to make sure that even if the solution you have is good and works, that you can actually pull it off in those conditions. And that is called pressure testing. So you need to train to the level where it's not just, oh yeah, from here you're gonna defend this, oh yeah, you're gonna break out of this grip while I just stand here and hold my arm out and hold your lapels while I do nothing, rather than in reality it would be I'd shove you as I grabbed you, pull you in, and from here repeatedly hockey punch you in the face. The solution to dealing with that is very, very different to the solution with dealing with someone just holding your lapels while you execute some fiddly wrist lock. So, point I'm trying to make is you must test your solutions at that high level and at simulating self-defense situations as realistically as possible, as long as you can do it safely. So, different ways you can pressure test. Obviously, from here, upping the intensity, as I just mentioned, but also to surprising your students, turning them around. This is the things that we do and I do often is I turn my students around and I attack them at random. I also make the attacks random so they don't know what they're going to be faced with, so they need to be able to make a quick decision and a quick assessment. Oh geez, how am I being attacked here? What is the solution? How do I get out of this? It needs to be a holistic scenario. So often I see martial artists teach people, oh, you get out of a bear hug like this, and then they get out of the bear hug and then they go, oh yeah, fantastic, I'm out of the bear hug. But in reality, guess what? You've still got an angry guy standing behind you who just tried to bear hug you, and they're going to attack you again. So of course, from here, you need to have a holistic mindset. If you escape from your bear hug, you must spin round and deal with that opponent right then and there. From here, whether that is choosing to do follow-up techniques and incapacitate that opponent, or deterring them from attacking you again, or escaping the situation if the opportunity is there. So point being is there is a lot more to self-defense than just learning, oh, this is how you get out of this. You need to condition your responses. So, I'll put it to you this way. My goal with my students is that I want them, if ever a self-defense situation, touch wood, it won't happen to them, but statistically it has happened to a lot of them. But my goal is that when something happens to them, they go, oh, this is familiar to me. This has happened to me half a dozen times in class. I know exactly what I'm going to do. I've got great conditioned responses, and yep, I know exactly what I'm doing. This is completely familiar. Best case scenario, they go, this is a piece of cake. You're trying to grab me like this? My instructor grabs me 10 times harder. From here, he's much worse than you. I'm going to tear you an absolute new one. From here, I'm going to breeze through you because I've been through much, much worse. So, I'm not going to go on and on about pressure testing anymore. The second thing we need to do is assess how holistic your training is. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a list of common skills and common self-defense scenarios that you should be familiar with. Essentially, I'm just going to go through some of the habitual acts of violence. I may miss a few from here. I can't remember everything completely offhand, but hopefully just hearing out the majority of things on this list will give you an indicator of like, oh, okay, yeah, I've ticked off most of the boxes, or better yet, all the boxes, everything that he's talked about, and I feel, oh, okay, I'm quite prepared for self-defense. But also too, from here, it's not just I've been through it once, because I can't stand that. I often ask people, oh, yep, have you learnt how to go through, have you learnt how to defense for, say, a swinging punch? And they go, oh yeah, my instructor taught me that once. They taught you it once. Once is not enough to condition a response. It's a no-brainer. I'm not going to bother even explaining it. So, let me go through some skills you should know. First of all, and probably the paramount self-defense skills, are of course that of de-escalation, being able to calm a situation down, being able to keep an opponent at a distance, and make sure you are trying to avoid the situation in the first place through some negotiation skills. Second thing, of course, is awareness and avoidance skills. Of course, being able to be aware of all the telltale signs of someone about to start a fight, throw a punch, etc., etc. And also, of course, you need to have your instructor should have also talked to you about simple avoidance skills and simply not being there in the first place, and simple precautions you can take to avoid danger in the first place and not be there at all. Okay, second thing is, of course, street fights are not all self-defense situations, but they still are quite common. And often street fights consist of one technique, and that is a barrage of swinging punches. If you watch footage of real violence, you'll often see that fights consist completely of that one strategy. There's no blocking, there's no other strikes, there's no other kicks, it's just that. So when was the last time you dealt with a barrage, not just one swinging punch, but an absolute barrage of swinging punches starting at close range? When was the last time you drilled someone picking a fight and starting a fight with you? And not just when was the last time, but how often have you done it? So the second category is stand-up grappling, and there's a wide range of stand-up grappling. Let me quickly race through a whole bunch of them. When was the last time you learnt basic wrist grabs, vertical, downwards, double-handed wrist grabs? When was the last time you dealt with choking attacks, being choked from behind or possibly even grabbed from behind, rear naked choked, bear hugs, overarm, underarm, headlocks, being tackled to the floor from here, or an attempted tackle, or an attempted grab, or attempt to come in close and grab and grapple with you. So, when was the last time you dealt with that, and how frequently have you gone through those scenarios? I apologise if I missed a couple, but hopefully that's a bit of a list that gives you an idea. Next set of scenarios is, of course, ground fighting. Have you, because it may well be that you've been pushed over, it may be that you've been tackled to the floor, or it may be that you started the self-defense situation on the floor. So, can you deal with someone pinning you to the floor in full mount, where they're sitting on your chest in full guard, side control, half guard from here, those common situations from here? Do you know how to get up off the floor from here? Do you know how to deal with a standing attacker who is trying to kick you? Do you know how to get up and away from a standing attacker without them coming in and punching you and kicking you as you're getting up? How often do you go through that training, and when was the last time you went through it? Next set is multiple attackers. A full 40% of violent crimes in the UK involve multiple attackers. It's not always going to be one-to-one, and it's very, very common, especially children with bullying from here. You need to learn how to deal with multiple attackers. So how often do you deal with that situation, and when was the last time you trained for multiple attackers? Next thing is weapons. Sadly, knife crime is on the rise in the UK, and also as well as knives, there's bats too. So how often have you dealt with those situations? How often have you learnt them? And when was the last time you did it? So there's a pretty comprehensive list of the habitual acts of violence. I know I missed out all sorts of different things, how to get up out of a chair, how to deal with a hair grab, all sorts of things. But it's a fairly comprehensive list. And the point I'm trying to make is maybe you know all of them, maybe you know some of them, but maybe you know none of them. Point is it's just a quick assessment of your martial ability and whether the karate that you're learning is holistic enough to deal with a wide range of self-defense situations that you will encounter in reality. Of course, as I said before at length, you must also condition your responses in a pressure testing environment, not a choreographed compliant environment. That choreographed and compliant drills are an important stepping stone. That's how you learn your techniques and how you learn how to deal with things. You can't immediately jump to high pressure and high intensity training to learn. But from here, you must eventually get to that level of pressure testing. Train hard, train smart, think common sense. Take care.